Hello and welcome to our September Procurement Talk. I am joining from Danville, California today. Excited to announce that we have really nice weather and clean air. We've had crazy smoke air for the last few weeks. So very, very exciting news here. Wanted to welcome all of you from around the globe. This is an event series that we host every single month to bring the procurement community together, to collaborate, to share ideas, and talk about thought leadership. Want to give a big shout out to our 4 sponsors that make this event series possible. And I'm going to have each of them come on stage for a minute or so to tell us a little bit about their company and something cool and innovative that they are working on. So with that, I want to invite Hannah from Jagger up to the stage. Hannah, really excited to have you with us today. If you could do a quick intro and then tell us something cool and innovative that your team is working on.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. First of all, thank you for having us. I know I'm excited to be here. I always gain a wealth of knowledge whenever I listen in. So I'm happy to be here on behalf of Jagger. We are a SaaS-based full source-to-pay procurement solution. And something that we're really focused on at the moment is any and all things ESG, environmental and social governance. So we are actually having a 4-part webinar series that we will be launching soon. And that will be called Procurement with Purpose, Protecting People, the Planet, and Profit. So definitely stay tuned to our social for any upcoming details if you're interested in attending that upcoming series.
Awesome, Hannah. Looking forward. I know I'm going to register, and thanks again for being here, and enjoy our panel discussion today. All righty. Next up, we have my friend Eric joining us from New York today. Eric, it looks like you've got some decent weather. Really excited to have you.
Yes.
And, want to thank Rapid Ratings and the team for being a sponsor, and would love to have you introduce yourself and tell us something cool and innovative that your team is working on.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, it's still in the 80s in New York, so it's great. So yeah, we're at Rapid Ratings. We're a SaaS-based algorithmic system enabling financial health and transparency and predictive insights between procurement or supply chain risk managers and their suppliers. So we're transforming the way teams manage enterprise and financial risk on both public and private companies. So something that we're innovating on is our FHR network, where clients can invite suppliers to self-rate and share their financial health rating, do it once and share it with many. So really glad to be here, and always learning something on the PTalks every month. So glad to be a sponsor and enjoy today's panel.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us, Eric. Alrighty. So a couple housekeeping notes, and then I'm going to introduce our moderator, and we are going to get to the main attraction, which is our panel discussion today. So there is a chat function in the LinkedIn Live, and I see we've got some comments coming in, which is really awesome. So do not be shy. Would love to have everyone tell us where in the world you are joining us from today. And then our topic for today is upping the ante, how procurement is adding value. And so if you have a question for the panel, a comment, or a story that you would like to share, please put those in the comments so we can communicate those with everybody that's joining with us today. This is also being recorded and will be made available immediately after on LinkedIn, on YouTube channel, and on other social media platforms. So if you're not able to stay for the whole thing, or you have colleagues or friends that you think can benefit from the discussion today, we will have that recording available. I do see that one of our other sponsors was able to hop on and join us. So hello, Ken. Welcome. Glad to have you here joining us from SoCal.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you quickly introduce yourself and tell us something cool and innovative that Worldwide Services is working on.
Yeah. Hey, Sarah. Sorry for the delay. I was having some issues today. I don't know what's going on in this crazy world today, but glad to be part of it. Can you hear me okay and everything?
Yep, you're
okay.
Good.
Perfect. So, hey, this is Ken Bobrick, Southern California. I work with Worldwide Services. So we are in the market of saving people money on their IT infrastructure. So if you have a storage, servers, switching, routers, anything of that nature that's from any OEM that has kind of run its course with the OEM, and you want to do an alternative maintenance solution, that's where Worldwide Services steps in. We're kind of that behind the scenes company that helps you with your legacy equipment, if you will. So, and we also buy and sell it. So, I mean, anything of that world. So we touch on the network side of it. And of course, the network guy couldn't even get on this webcam. Totally, right? So don't buy my network at home. So,
and
no,
I see, Ken, you're kind of a sports guy. We got some memorabilia behind you.
Oh, man, I can tell you these next 17 weeks are going to be the best weeks. I mean, I just love the NFL. I loved last night's game in Las Vegas. I thought it was like a concert. I don't know if any of you watched it. It was wild. I have to go to Vegas to see the Raiders. But, yeah, I'm a big Seahawks fan, and, man, I loved what they did in Indy. So, you know, I'm excited, as I always am. So,
awesome, Ken. Great to have you with us today.
Okay, sorry again for being late, but I'm here.
Alrighty, so with that, I am going to introduce our panel moderator today. It is a very, very good friend of mine. Her name is Jane Zhang, and she is actually joining us from Canada. We've actually got quite a representation from the Canadian procurement community today, which is really, really awesome. So a couple fun facts that I want to share with you about Jane before I bring her on stage. So first, she is a Scotch fanatic. So her favorite distillery is a company, and I may butcher the name, it's called Talisker, and she plans to take a trip back there one day to restock her supply. Jane loves paddleboarding, and she has an inflatable paddleboard that she takes hiking with her when she goes to obscure lakes. And Jane has completed over 100 scuba dives. She absolutely loves diving, although she's a pure vacation diver and avoids cold water whenever possible. So with that, I want to welcome Jane to the stage. So Jane, thank you so much for moderating and being here with us today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
All right, so with that, we're going to bring all of our panelists up on stage. I am going to mute myself, Jane, and let you take it away and have a really interesting conversation for the next hour.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Sarah. First and foremost, you know, as the co-founder of Edge Sourcing, we are a specialized managed procurement services provider in the industry for Canadian services. And, you know, procurement and the PTalks is always an awesome, awesome event for us to attend. I am super excited because I know I've had some interaction with some of our panelists, and I did get the pleasure of meeting our panelists earlier as we were preparing for this event. And I have to say, you guys have an awesome lineup today. I will not steal their thunder. I will let them introduce themselves before they answer each of their first questions. But we are very, very excited to be gathered here today to be able to bring you some awesome expertise and stories from these experts and all of the knowledge that they've gathered. So first and foremost, I mean, we've all been living through this COVID pandemic for a while now, and you know, the virtual world is nothing new to any of us at this point. But the pandemic has brought us a lot of very interesting challenges. With us being over a year into the pandemic and really looking into the future, I really wanted to take the opportunity for us to collectively reflect on the last year and a half and to really look at, you know, some of the challenges that you guys had experienced. And I'd love for you guys to be able to share some of the stories and maybe some of the challenges that you guys encountered. So Dana, why don't we start with you? And I think the question we have for you is, what were some of the toughest challenges that you actually found yourself facing in 2020?
Sure. Thanks for handing it over and making me first to go. I am Dana Small. I'll just give you guys kind of a brief background about me. I'm Associate Director of Strategic Sourcing in charge of commercial, professional services, HR. I've got a long history in pharma, about 20 years. I've been doing strategic sourcing procurement for around 15 years, I think, 10, 15 years. In the finance. And I also have a blog, a business blog, and I also have a podcast called MarPro for marketing procurement professionals. But back to your question. So what were, I think you said, the toughest challenges? So for me, there was a huge reduction in spend in some of the categories that we managed. So for us, like travel, right? Some kind of the obvious ones, travels, meeting expenses, things of that sort. And with that reduction in spend and the unknown of when are we going to be able to travel again? When are we going to be able to, have on-site meetings and have those certain type of expenses come back? It's been really hard for us to negotiate with some of our suppliers. When you think about an airline, or you think about rental cars, or even hotels, to be able to go and sit down with them and negotiate, you have zero leverage because you just don't know, what the future holds. And I think a lot of us are guessing and hoping. But just recently we found out yesterday we're not going back until next year. So things are constantly changing. And I think that has been one of the hardest things to deal with, is not having a clear indication, or at least a general indication of which way we're going and how much we're going to spend. And it really just limits us when it comes to negotiations and other things.
I can absolutely relate to that, Dana. We just closed out a travel credit negotiation with some of the airlines for one of our clients.
Yep.
And it is an incredible task to negotiate a travel credit with an airline company that has really suffered through the course of the pandemic. So I can absolutely relate to that. The next person I'd love to call to the stage, Stephanie, I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Fellow Canadian represent, fellow Montrealer represent. How have you and your team managed the current labor shortage situation that's happening?
Just first of all, hi everyone. My name is Stéphanie Leduc. I'm a Senior Director Sourcing Strategy and IT Portfolio at National Bank of Canada here in Montreal. So thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it. So yeah, this is a good question. It's a real problem for all of us. There's two things here: attraction and retention. It's very difficult right now in the market. Company needs to be attractive for candidates. I mean, how to create a work environment to attract people, where people can feel comfortable and make sure that they can contribute regardless of their background or culture. So they want to be able to bounce their ideas, challenge each other. It's diversity and inclusion for sure. So understanding and managing diversity means listening to someone else, even if you don't like what you hear. It's very important to create the right work environment. A great example for that is for attraction retention is, for example, student and interns. We want them to come back, work for you guys, for the company where you at. So they try it. If they liked it, they want to come back for sure. And this is what we want. Of course, we need the full plan, all strategic workforce plan. This is very important, and diversity and inclusion should be part of it for sure.
Yeah, and I love that. And it's such an incredible thing to hear organizations that are still working on building up that culture, especially with us all moving to virtual remote. You lose so much of that in-person, face-to-face, I'm sitting at a coffee cooler conversation. And we don't realize how important that was to building the culture of a company until after we've lost it. So thank you so much for that, Stephanie. So another topic that's really, I think, been of interest over the course of the last while is the pandemic has shown light on procurement's importance in organizations. And, I think we have some awesome stories from you guys of how your team has worked together with organizations during and throughout the pandemic to really demonstrate value. So OP, I'd like to invite you to introduce yourself and then maybe share with us a little bit how you and your team are adding value to your organization.
Thank you, Jane. I'm Opi Gahunia. I'm the Director of Global Indirect Procurement at Belden. I'm also based in Canada as well, too. So here we go. Belden's got a global presence. So I think depending on the requirements for regional specifics for each of the locations, it kind of varies. But I think overall, I think the pandemic has kind of shown that, procurement professionals are not just traditional. I think we've had a stereotype where we're really focused on cost savings, and that's kind of what all we do. I think one of the important things that the pandemic has shown light on for procurement professionals is that we're more than that. I know specifically at Belden, when we were in the midst or right at the beginning of the pandemic, we were looking for alternative sources for, a lot of our machinery and equipment comes from Europe, and we weren't getting that supply of spare parts and whatnot. So getting alternative sources for that, working with our suppliers to get drawings for those parts and being able to source them locally. And I think it really came down to, risk mitigation and trying to keep our factories running. So I think really that's kind of something I've learned for sure throughout the pandemic, that definitely we need to look at more than just cost savings. We kind of look at total cost of ownership, and then really risk mitigation for the future.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for that, OP. And I think that is such an important thing for us to remember, and for our businesses to start to realize that, procurement, we're about creating value. We're not just about, slicing that dollar and squeezing that extra 10%, despite whatever reputation we may have in the marketplace. And I think over the last year and a half, we've really seen a lot of really great business partners start to recognize that and start to work with us to say, okay, what else can we do? What else can procurement bring to the table? So it's fantastic. Greg, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, of course. And speaking of people, speaking of organizations and stakeholders, maybe you can share a story around how you involve stakeholders in that contracting process, both through the finalization and the ongoing management. And if you were able to really use the contracting process to really drive an advantage in the ongoing stakeholder relationship management side of things.
Sure. Thanks, Jane. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gregg Bass. I'm the Director of Spend Management with Rent-A-Center. I have been in sourcing longer than 20 years now. I actually went to school for this. I know a lot of folks kind of find their way into sourcing and procurement, but this is what I always wanted to do. I enjoy the field, and in terms of the pandemic, both myself and my team, we've probably had a bit of a different engagement than a lot of the folks on the call. Being based in Texas, we culturally have approached the pandemic a little bit differently. So I've actually been back in the office since July of last year, which has been a different experience. And the other challenge for us is actually our demand, our customer demand, and our sales and our revenue really hit all-time highs as we went into the pandemic. As the supply market tightened up, there were, a lot more folks needed computers and monitors or washers and dryers or office furniture, and that really put a strain on our entire organization and us in the indirect side. So there were some days that we would move from negotiating multi-year, multi-million-dollar software renewal. And then there were other days where we'd spend all day trying to find thousands and thousands of bottles of sanitizers or masks to keep our customers and our coworkers safe. In terms of serving as a strategic advantage through the contracting process or working with our stakeholders, the number one thing that we always focus on is flexibility and really understanding our stakeholders' needs. There are so many times that a stakeholder would come to us and ask for one thing, but with our understanding of the market, with our understanding of our suppliers' capabilities, and what resources they have available to them, we frequently present options back to our stakeholders, give them the pros and cons of each, and always work to make sure that we understand what really matters in terms of defining a scope or a need and making sure that we address the true need as quickly as possible. And then in terms of finalizing through a contract, it's an active dialogue where we're explaining a lot of the clauses to them, or explaining some of the different options to them and how it would impact their engagement model with the supplier. The other big challenge that we've had over the past 3 years, our company has gone from agreeing to an acquisition at $1.6 billion to acquiring a different company for 1.3. So it's been a very dynamic 3 years. And because of that, we've had lots of different experiences in terms of crafting contracts for maximum flexibility, whether we're rapidly ramping up or ramping down, and having that open discussion with the stakeholders.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Greg. And I think all of us in procurement in some function remember the mad dash that happened early last year when all of a sudden we all had to buy sanitizer and masks, and there was a mask shortage all over the place. And of course, they called procurement, right? Because who else are you going to call? You can't call Batman. He's busy. Awesome. So now a quick reminder to the audience. I did see a question come in. We would love to have you guys share. Definitely do comment in the chat if you guys have any questions for this team now that you've met the great speakers that we have for you guys today. We will be inserting your questions here and there, so don't worry. Once you send it in, I will see it, and we will ask as part of certain points in our agenda. So it will get covered. So we do encourage you guys to definitely share questions if you have any for specific individuals or for the general team. One of the topics that we definitely wanted to cover was around the major supply chain challenges. So I think even more than COVID, I think we've seen a lot of interesting, news stories. I'm thinking of a certain ship that blocked a certain canal for a while. And there's been definitely a lot of major supply disruptions that have shifted, I think, the common role and the common public opinion of the role of procurement. So I'd love for you guys to speak a little bit more on this topic and what you've seen. So OP, one of the questions I have for you is, do you really think that the perception of the procurement professional is changing or improving in any way throughout this last year and a half or throughout the last period of time itself?
I think the answer to that question is kind of both yes and no. I think first from the yes side, I think C-suite executives, I think definitely, I think their perception has changed. I think, specifically talking from my perspective and Belden's perspective and some other colleagues, I think we've really stepped up to the plate here during the last year to really drive, more things than just cost savings, like I kind of mentioned earlier. And I think we've been tasked to do so much more, and the expectations, I think, have been set now for us kind of going forward in areas like corporate social responsibility, innovation, measuring value, risk, as well as supplier management, supplier relationship management. So I think from that side, I think it's a yes. I think where we have some more work to do, where it's always a little more difficult, is everyone else in the organization. I think they really still perceive, or they don't get a chance to see what procurement professionals do. It's just more or less, hey, we need something, go get it for us. And they don't see all the work behind it. But I think, as we work with the individuals within our organizations, I think it's important to kind of advertise exactly kind of what we do, and improve that perception. Whether it's, hey, I was able to source something locally as opposed to getting it from overseas, and reduces your lead time, or, you may be paying a little bit more, but, from a delivery standpoint, we have somebody local that can service it, or whatever. So there's a lot of different ways we can try and come up with a solution to try and, provide service to the folks in our organization. And I think it's important that you take every opportunity to try and advertise that, not only to that particular person, but other stakeholders in the organization, to show them, hey, this is what we can accomplish if we kind of work together, or we have buy-in from those stakeholders.
Fantastic. And I definitely agree with you. Among our many, many hats in procurement, negotiator, junior lawyer, project manager, project analyst, business requirements analyst, we also have to be internal sales, right? We're selling our services internally and trying to get our internal clients to buy in and want to work with us. So I think that's part of what makes the role so exciting. That's part of what I love about it. And it's also part of what makes it so challenging. Stephanie, when we look at the last year and we've seen all of this supply risk disruption, we've seen a lot of suppliers really where organizations were very heavily dependent on one supplier, or a specific group of suppliers. And when disruption occurred, there was a lot of disruption to the business operations themselves. So why do you think supplier risk management is so important, and how do you guys manage it?
Managing risk means, first of all, identifying what can go wrong in advance in your relationship with suppliers and having a plan in place to deal with it. And failing to do this could generate some surprises, unwelcome surprises. So why it's so important? Because suppliers' risk management framework provides visibility into all aspects of suppliers' risk. It ensures that suppliers meet requirements by continually monitoring them and can help mitigate the risk through a good governance in place. So it also can track which supplier may be affected in terms of financial, environment, regulatory, legal risk, for example. So supplier risk management plans should address all the different areas where suppliers' issue may arise. These stages can include onboarding with new suppliers or existing one. This type of risk management can drive efficiencies and reduce expenses also. So to monitor every supplier allows an organization to assess which of their suppliers can have the greatest impact on their business and potentially prevent disruption in the flow of business operations. This is what I think.
Yeah, and absolutely agree with you. When we see businesses that are over reliant on one critical supplier, you really do open your business up to a very large disruption risk if that's anything should happen to that supplier. So it's very, very critical for us to take on the role of supplier risk management. I want to take a quick pause. We got an audience question. I love this question because we always get it when we talk about negotiations and when we teach negotiations to our clients and to our classes. How do you guys negotiate when you have no leverage? And Dana, I'm going to throw this question over to you because I think you mentioned that you have suffered through a lot of that over the last year.
Yeah, I have had to suffer through a lot of it. But what ends up happening is, or at least I found in my experience, you end up getting really creative. And I think when you think of procurement and negotiations, you don't normally think creative, but I think this is an area where it allows you to think of other solutions, being able to, whether it's terms, whether it's payment terms you can negotiate with, whether it's other business terms, SLAs, you can kind of adjust, right? So I think there's enough business terms typically that go into most contracts. You can try to get to be a little bit creative with those and negotiate, maybe a longer contract, 3 or 5 years. And maybe just other things, taking out penalties if you have penalties. This way, everybody is kind of a win-win, right? In a sense that at least you get something and they get something back in return to try to be able to either maintain those costs as flat or, kind of keep them below percentage. But that is just how I typically try to handle it. Even things like tiered rebates, knowing that, volume could increase and then it would be beneficial for everybody involved.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important, that adaptability and that flexibility to look and think outside of the box, because sometimes we get put in that position where we really have to think of outside the box. OP, do you want to add on anything to Dana's response there? Any of your own experiences?
Yeah, I think I'm going through a couple of those right now. So I know, kind of to add on to what Dana was saying, I think it's important to try and find, you may not be able, or you may feel like you have no leverage on the actual, whether it's software or whatever you're trying to procure the deal for, but there may be other things when you look at training or implementation or, additional, whether it's that supplier has annual conferences that you can maybe attend and trying to get those included. I know it's not, specifically a cost savings, but at the end of the day, I think it adds some value, and you're able to show that you can, get some movement on their original position.
100%. And I think, when you think about total cost of ownership, that's why it's so important to look at that. It's, the training to a supplier might actually be absolutely zero cost to them, or at the very least something that they actually even want to encourage you to do, because it makes you more of an expert and it lowers their regular maintenance and tickets cost. But it's something that, you know, for your team brings a lot of value. So I love that. Now, when we think about working in procurement, and I'm sure many of our audience members actually relate to that, we're often challenged with getting a seat at the table to demonstrate our true value. So I'd love for you guys to share maybe some of your past work experience or examples of where you've been a little bit challenged in getting into that space. So Gregg, I'm going to throw it over to you and have you share maybe an example of a time where the stakeholder was very dead set on a solution. You know, we've all been in that situation. It has to be Joe up in Bolden, no matter what, can't be anybody else. So even though you were pretty sure there was a better way to address the need, how did you share the information with them? And even though you could have been seen as going against their original strategy.
Sure. You know, I think you said it well, Jane. You know, we are internal consultants. We are internal salespeople and sourcing professionals, especially on the indirect side, you know, which I currently sit in that space in the organization. If we're not providing an immediate ROI to our stakeholders or value to them, they can do their jobs without us. And that's pretty humbling. So we always keep that in mind when we work with them. We don't hand out a lot of edicts or, you know, say things, thou shall, but we always encourage them to trust the process. And it's a big sports phrase. You know, but the number one thing that I encourage our executives is just trust the process. In roughly 2 years ago, we went through a major initiative where at our 5,000 retail locations, we moved on from our historic data connections, and we had a pretty strong vision as to the solution and the supplier that we wanted to use, both for the network replacement and for the connectivity. So my approach there, rather than just entering into a direct negotiation with no leverage on an area that was measured in millions of spend, was really just to encourage them to work through the sourcing process. I thanked them for identifying their strategy so clearly, and, you know, promised them that no matter what, we would absolutely lead our engagement with the contact of each of those suppliers for connectivity and hardware. As we went through the process, you know, the 6 or 7 step process, whichever your organization prefers, we had a lot of learnings along the way, and by understanding their needs and what mattered to them around connectivity speeds, around latency, around security at the edge, we ended up going a completely different direction on both the connectivity and the hardware. It was a bit shocking because it was, in both cases, a supplier that had a very strong relationship in the past, but it was a big shift. But through the learnings, like I said, through the process, it became the obvious choice. And again, the other thing that I stress to my stakeholders, I never ever make decisions, but it's my job to put together the presentation so that they make the right decision. But we provide recommendations.
100%. And as a, you know, management consultants in procurement and sourcing, I can tell you that it's very much the same thing, even when you are the supplier in that scenario versus a direct procurement team member. So it's, I think that is the approach we have to always take to help enable our business clients and our business customers to make the right decisions and empower them with the knowledge and the information. But, you know, thinking about the last while, we've actually had a really great success, I think, in actually getting a seat at the table. So there's been organizations, and Dana, I know yours is one of them, where you guys have a very strong procurement organization. But now that you have that seat at the table, what can you guys proactively do to ensure that the business continues to see those process efficiencies and the savings so that they keep you at the table, they keep you as a trusted advisor, and they go to you continuously for support in all aspects of the business?
Yeah, so I think one of the cool aspects of our job is actually bringing new technology and bringing new solutions to the business, right? They've got their day jobs, and I think, you know, procurement is an extension of their team. We can do all the legwork, we can do all of the research and background and save them a lot of time up front by, you know, watching the capabilities presentations ourselves, doing the assessments, things of that sort. But being able to find those new technology solutions and bring them to the right people within the organization, I think is the most amazing thing you can do, because you're proving to them I'm thoughtful and I'm trying to do what's best for not only you, but for the company. And so by doing this, you're saying, hey, I'm part of the team, whatever your goals are, my goals are, and let's just, continue on this together. So I think by being proactive and finding new solutions, it's probably one of the best ways you can get somebody to trust you and then, continue to keep you at the table.
100%. It's my favorite look when you get in front of us, one of their C-suites, and you say, hey, look, I did a spend analysis and I found this opportunity to maybe save you a couple $1 million. Are you interested? I hardly ever get no to that answer. Usually it's yes.
Exactly. I mean, and even finding other technology solutions that you think could potentially save the company money or that are cutting edge. I know I just talked to somebody who's doing like holographic presence, which is really cool and new. And there's a lot of different ways you could, use that and potentially save money. So I've reached out to all my business partners, trying to see if they're interested. But I think it definitely lets them know that you're keeping them top of mind and trying to do what's best for them too.
That's awesome. And that's very 2050. Sarah, I suggest for the next PTalk, we set up some holographic projections. That'd be great. Now, a quick detour. I know there's an awesome discussion happening right now in the comments here around what do we do in emergency response? And, really, I think there's a very clear and evident suggestion here that, our procurement policies almost became a hindrance in the cases of pandemic, in the cases where, suddenly you lose your primary supplier and now you have this need to quickly source anybody who can fulfill that need and bring them in. And then you don't have the time to necessarily go through your supplier qualification. You don't have time to necessarily go through all of the different checks and balances that all of the procurement processes have put in place to protect an organization, because now essentially the house is on fire. I'd love to hear you guys share maybe a little bit about your opinion, your stance on the idea of how should we as procurement adjust our protocols looking forward into the future, so that we could potentially respond to these FEMA or these emergency situations a little bit faster and a little bit more fluidly. Maybe I'll toss that one over to you, Stephanie, to start us off. If you don't mind, I've totally put you on the spot there because we pulled out from our comments here and our discussion here. But essentially, I think the question is, like, when we're looking at our procurement policies, when we're looking at adjusting our procurement policies, what do you see potentially changing to allow for more flexibility and more fluidity during the pandemic and a post-pandemic world or in an emergency situation?
It looks like she can't unmute.
Oh, she can unmute. Okay, well, Opie, Dana, would either of you like to take that question?
I mean, yeah, I can talk about it a little bit. I think a lot of times people don't think procurement, they don't think, risk management. And I think that's one of the key aspects of part of our job is that we do have good policies and procedures in place. Whether it's inventory or suppliers, to have that category strategy to say, okay, we have our primary, but in case of times, we know we can go to our secondary or, another alternative. If not, we can then work with maybe an incumbent supplier and get them to produce it. So I think by having a really good long-term category strategy and understanding your supply base, you can kind of think ahead and have that prepared for and avert that risk, right, of potentially stocking out and having an incumbent supplier who's only one who produces that. You should already be in and working with somebody else to try to get them to be able to be a secondary supplier at that point in time. It should be part of your plan.
100%. Supplier development and developing out that secondary source is so critical. And I mean, knowing the industry you're in there, Dana, and Opie, I'm sure you're going to expand on this as well there. But knowing the industry, I mean, we often get into this position where there is only that one supplier, but it doesn't have to be that one supplier for the rest of time. You can always develop out other sources. So Opie, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in to Dana. I think if you kind of wait for another pandemic or anything else from an emergency situation, you're already too late. I think you need to, either when you're onboarding a supplier or when you're have a product or item that you're getting, I think that's the right time to make sure that you have either an alternative source or an emergency kind of protocol for if you identify that as a key item or a strategic item that you need to have in place. I think you need to have that emergency plan kind of set more on a supplier to supplier basis or product to product basis, as opposed to just kind of an overall encompassing emergency policies or something that would be over encompassing like our standard procedures and policies would be. I think if you have that in place beforehand, you kind of have your playbook as far as what's going to happen, or if something does happen, you're able to quickly maneuver or use that playbook to procure whatever you need to get in. So that's my 2 cents and some of the strategies that we've used at Belden to help us here going forward now, especially for equipment coming out of Europe, Germany, Italy, and stuff like that. We are looking for, spare part suppliers that can help us locally as well, or we're making sure those suppliers have enough on-hand quantity in North America to support our business.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Opie. Stephanie, do we have your mic back, or are you able to unmute?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, we have audio.
Difficulties. I don't know why. So I'm very sorry about that.
Not a problem. I just wanted to see if there's anything you wanted to add on to there. You might have missed a little bit there, but we're talking about essentially any sort of changes that you would perceive you guys potentially making to your procurement processes to adjust for emergency type of situations going forward into the future.
We have, of course, we can manage emergency through, every time we have emergency on a regularly basis, outside of the pandemic, so we have, we need to adapt. We need to push everything. And then of course we work with legal, we work with security, we work with a bunch of other team at the bank. And it's very, very important that every team is tied together and look in the same direction and make sure that, there's an emergency, and then can we please work together and make sure that, we can have a contract in place in I don't know, a few days or whatever it is. We need, so here at the bank, it's easy to do it. We are used to it, so it's okay. But of course, we need policy. There's always a strong policies with a lot of pages, and then we follow this usually almost of the time. But there's also other situation that we should take care of it outside of the long process, and then we are used to it. So we manage this very carefully because security information, and then few steps are very, very important. We can miss it, but other than that, so we have to manage this through an exception.
And I love that answer, because you're so right. Living in the procurement world, we've always had fires. We've always had emergency fires, always had things turn up, and it had to be done yesterday. It's just we seem to have seen a lot more of that happen over the last year, but I think we have definitely seen it continuously throughout our entire profession. All right. So to close us off, I consider myself a glass half full kind of person. I'm a bit of an optimist. I think, looking into the future, it looks very bright for procurement. We are going to come out of this at some point in time. There is going to be a new normal once we emerge, but I look forward to the day where, Dana, you were saying you're an extrovert. I'm an extrovert as well. I look forward to the day where we can once again be in the office again. Greg, I'm very jealous of your current office presence. And, I'd love to hear from each of you on your view of the future. So, Stephanie, maybe I'll let you start off, because I know you've got a hard stop in a little bit here. But how would you, looking into the future of procurement, how would you redefine that? What does that look like for you?
For me, future of procurement is process automation and artificial intelligence. This can help procurement department uncover information and data in ways that humans have a little bit more difficulties. So the real value of automation and data analysis is not how fast the information is collected, but how strategically is organized, implemented, and accurate. The time to embrace it is now. So let the robots, focus and assist with data analysis and process automation, and let the best talent, so to create, innovate, problem solve, and make the organization stronger, leaner, and more competitive in the age of automation. As I mentioned, it's with a culture that embraces rapid change, experimentation, innovation, new technology will create competitive advantage for sure. But don't get me wrong, we will always need humans, because procurement will remain a corporate function with build a strong relationship and knowledge, and powered by men as well as machine. We need both. We need both, actually, but focus on the right things. So.
I love that. And, I'm a big fan of, an Excel spreadsheet full of data. I think just as every other procurement nerd out there is, but I definitely agree with you. Let the tech do what the tech does best, but you definitely need people, because the tech is ultimately just a tool. OP, maybe you can share with us a little bit from a leadership perspective. How can procurement leaders improve the perception an organization has on them and their team? And what does that look like when we're looking into the future here?
So I think it's imperative as a procurement leader, or as your team, you try and build out your team, and you try and be viewed as a trusted partner or advisor, like you and Jane and Dana mentioned earlier. I think it's almost like in your personal life, when you're about to make a big decision, or there's something that you maybe not understand, you run it by a friend, whether it's over a beer or a Talisker. I'll throw that in there for you, Jane. But basically, you're looking for guidance from somebody that you really trust. I think procurement teams, or kind of what I like to do, is try and be reliable for the people in the organization, be predictive, and building credibility with stakeholders. I think to do that, you got to align yourselves with the right people in the organization. As far as gaining their trust, it may start off with something small, like you save them a couple of $1,000 or something like that, or but I think all these small little wins that you may have, it gains, or it builds that trust between you and the stakeholders, and they'll go and tell their colleagues, hey, OP saved me X amount, and I didn't think I was going to get anything. You never know when that next big deal or would come up, and that it's a game changer. I think we have. I think as a result, you get more opportunity to build supplier relationships with that, and you basically can deliver additional value, and kind of building that trust and meeting the expectations of C-suite executives. I think it kind of gives you the best of both worlds, and you're kind of bridging the gap between people's perception of you and what you're actually delivering. So I think that's kind of the path to improving the perception and being able to deliver value beyond cost savings from my side.
I love that. And I love that, you say there's no project that's really too small, right? You deliver on some of those small projects. You deliver on some of those things that are complete pains in someone's behind. I'll put it that way, because we are streaming live. And all of a sudden, your next project comes on and you just hit your entire savings target for the entire year, right? And you've never even thought that project, you never knew about it, but they know about you, so they bring that forward, and I think that's amazing. I will add on to that, OP. I'm always happy to have a virtual Talisker with anybody who wants to chat procurement, because I am a big procurement nerd. All right, Greg, maybe you can provide our audience with some advice on how to work at overcoming the challenges with working with stakeholders that don't see the value in working with sourcing. Unfortunately, we still live in a world where there are still folks who don't see that value. I know, shocking. We don't understand how that can possibly be the case, but there's definitely still those departments out there, and there's still folks who don't see that value necessarily. So maybe looking into the future, what are some things that we could do to help overcome that challenge?
It is shocking because, for folks like us, we know the value that our organizations can provide and how we can help eliminate cost or improve processes or redundancy. And we also know that depending on a company's margin, for every dollar we save, that's 10 or 15 less we have to go sell. So I think we live in an incredibly critical function. So the number one thing that I do, and this goes against my core as a sourcing professional, I do not talk to stakeholders about savings. They don't care. They have their budget set for the year. Now, our CEO, our CFO, we will have that conversation all day long. But our operational leaders, if they can, there's the old adage that no one was ever fired for hiring IBM. So if we're going to go in and select a less than based on price, it's a losing battle. So I always try and live in their space and encourage my team to understand the technical aspect of whatever role, right? And that's obviously the technical lane is a little bit different in marketing or real estate than it is in the obvious example of IT, but we have to understand and be able to have a basic technical conversation, understand their needs, understand their pain points, and where they want to improve. We've talked a little bit about data analysis and understanding all the data that's available to us. One of the things I love about sourcing is it is a rare job that is 50% science and 50% art. And you have to do your homework in the science to be able to influence the art. So we have to become experts in our spend. We have to know our numbers inside and out, better than our stakeholders, better than our suppliers, and the relationships of how they're connected. Whether it's number of stores influences these suppliers, or a security event influences this sort of spend. But to the extent we can, we live in their world. And our number one sourcing metric as a team is the number of events executed per year. Savings is secondary.
No, and I absolutely love that. Putting yourself in the shoes of somebody else, because at the end of the day, you are acting as a support function to an organization. We are supporting our business units. We can close the contracts, we can sign the contracts, we can have amazing supplier management programs. But ultimately speaking, when the server goes down at 3 a.m. in the morning, it's not us picking up the phone to call that supplier. It's somebody else, and they're the one that's going to have to work with that supplier. And they're the ones who really want to make sure that that supplier picks up at 3 a.m. in the morning and sends somebody out to service that. So I love that answer. Quick reminder to the chat here. If anybody has any questions, anybody has any additional questions, please do send them on in. Otherwise, we will probably close a little bit earlier than planned originally today. But before we get into that, Dana, one thing I definitely want to hear from you is, as we're looking into the future, we have our standard savings. We have, cost avoidance, we have cost reduction, we have all of these things. But when you're talking about getting creative, when you're talking about, really looking to the future, what are some things that you would recommend sourcing professionals to really think about to create those additional savings?
Yeah, so it's very interesting given the last kind of message that he kind of gave, and it kind of builds on that. To me, I think in marketing procurement specifically, it's very much based on relationship building. But I found that if you can build those relationships elsewhere, that is what really can allow you to then implement and gain their trust to be able to do and approach big ideas, right? You want to maybe consolidate the supply base. Maybe you want to throw a new supplier in the mix. Maybe, you want to go to zero-based budgeting. You can do those things a lot easier if you already have that, built in. So for me, the one thing that I found is best is just building those relationships, right? I mean, and marketing it really is key, but I think, other areas don't focus on it as much. But I think having that skill set and being able to do that definitely can make a difference when it comes to trying to implement huge ideas, or, trying to take them in another direction, or, just persuading them to think kind of outside the box.
Absolutely. And I think that's fantastic, Dana. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us. I know you have to drop off a little bit early, so really appreciate the time that you've taken with us today.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
So we did have a question coming from the audience here. So are any of the panelists here using AI in your daily workload? So with regards to augmenting tactical activities to enable more value added activities. So Greg, maybe I can let you take that and start us off.
Yeah, happy to. Melissa, that's a great question. We're not actually using AI in our daily sourcing role, but we are using that as part of the management of our stores, our retail locations, and have really sophisticated and complex databases that are running a massive decision engine for us. So, if you were to go into a Rent-A-Center location or one of our other owned brands, we don't pull credit, right? But we have a number of databases that feed into this AI engine that we run, that in less time than it would take to run a credit report, based on your name, zip code, and last 4 digits of your social security, we have a model that, as we move to this, has led to better decisions and lower risk than off of a traditional historic credit pull. I will also say that as someone who has been involved with a lot of the negotiations and the contracts for these platforms, they are not cheap, but they are worth every penny. Don't tell the suppliers that, though. But we are challenging ourselves to try and figure out how to use AI more and more. We haven't quite found a solution yet on the indirect side. I think it might be a little more helpful in terms of the direct side, materials forecasting, materials planning, things along those lines. But on a similar note, slightly less tech and exciting, but we are using a lot of process automation that is replacing individual keystrokes today.
Absolutely. And I think on that topic, Greg, it's always interesting to me how when we as procurement go to buy our own tools, we almost become the same BUs that we always struggle to overcome those challenges with. So Dana, maybe I'll let you expand on this a little bit, and I'm leveraging a little bit of my understanding of our past history there, but maybe you can expand and share a little bit what BioMarin is doing in terms of AI.
Yeah, so we aren't, as far as I know, I have limited knowledge of what everybody's doing across the organization. We don't really use it in our day-to-day, but we do use it in some of the softwares that we have. So Tealbook is one of the softwares. I know they use AI, and that is a place where basically it's like a LinkedIn for suppliers, right? It has your supplier database in there, and then it matches it up with, external information, about the supplier. There's tons of stuff out there. And I think that AI really can make a difference when, you're sitting with somebody and you may not know every single supplier in the category and you want to know something really quickly. You can go to that source and they can pull it quickly, and they can use the AI to be able to just get you results, that make more sense versus going to Google or something of that sort.
Awesome.
So it's Tealbook, and it basically is a supplier platform tool that we use. Initially, I rolled it out globally so that anybody could use it, so anybody has access to it at our company. But actually, the sourcing and procurement functions are the ones who obviously we use it the most, right? Always looking to find new suppliers. And the cool thing about it is you can put not only your vendor master in there, you could put contracting data, your spend data. And when you go there, it provides you with a bunch of information, not only that you put in on your vendor master, but from externally, like I know they recently did supplier diversity. I think there's a new one with EcoVadis that they have done. There's some really cool things that you can go if you're looking for a small diverse supplier, if you're looking for one that's green, you can go in and do that. Or if you just want to maintain your supply base, you can go in and quickly find it and, see what's trending. Oh, why are we, I'm not going to suggest this supplier because I see the spend just dropped off dramatically. Let's find out why, and maybe we shouldn't include them in the next RFP, right? So the platform's pretty cool. We've had it for a while, but yeah, they definitely use AI, and I think it really sets them apart.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Dana. And again, if I don't see any other questions come in, I don't think we have any other questions. Thank you guys so much for your time, Dana, Opie, Greg. I know it's been very, very valuable for a lot of the folks on the line here. I think judging from some of the comments, I'm really loving the positive comments that we're getting from some of the BUs that work with procurement. So I love that. Always love that, to hear that we are still getting that positive reputation within organizations. And I think with that, I'll pass it back to you, Sarah, to close us out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jane, for moderating. Dana, Opie, Greg, and Stephanie, I appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to share your thoughts and wisdom. I think it's really important that as a community, we continue to collaborate and share ideas and network. We sometimes get stuck in our spreadsheets and in our home offices, and it's important to know that there are more people, procurement nerds out there like us, and to make friends and expand our network. So normally our PTalks are the second Tuesday of every month at 1 Eastern. But next month, there's the Sourcing Industry Group Conference in person in Carlsbad. Big deal, actually, to be able to see people face to face. I think Jane is going to be there. I'm going to be there. If you haven't checked it out, highly recommend go to sig.org. And so because of their conference, we're going to pivot when we're holding our PTalk so it doesn't conflict. So our next PTalk is going to be October 7th at 1 p.m. Eastern. So if you've enjoyed the conversation today or signed up for our monthly series, just know that we are making that slight pivot and change next month. So again, October 7th, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Topic for the year is upping the procurement ante, what procurement is doing to add value at their organizations. And with that, I want to wish everyone a wonderful afternoon or evening and hope to see everybody next month.